Prelude. I stood at the cusp of civilization, staring at its outer gates from the wrong side. The unadorned gray metal extended as far as my eyes could see, enclosing my world, my people, in a giant circle of rectangular pillars with no wiggle room between them, save for the gaps I knew laid bare in some regions. Omnipresent green light emanated from the pillar's surface, rendering them visible against the night sky. They had always reminded me of buck teeth. Inside those gates was everything I knew. It was my home, or had been. "Lenora here will be accompanying you until your trial is complete," the assemblyman said flatly. He stood before me with his hands in the pockets of his suit jacket. Against the pillar's green light, I could make out the pin on his lapel that only assemblymen wore. I squinted at him. "You think I'll try to escape?" The assemblyman shot me a contemptuous look. "We heard what you did to Kara's body. I don't know what you're dumb enough to try. If you do attempt to escape, I imagine there won't be any need for a trial. The wolves will kill you on sight." I wanted to grab the smug prick's face, but my hands were tied, literally. I didn't do it. The assemblyman put a hand up. "Save it. You were the last one with her. There's a hammer-shaped hole in her hotel room." I shook my head. "It wasn't me." "Tell the wolves that. Meanwhile, you jeopardized the first trade agreement between us and them in decades." I gritted my teeth. "Can you at least send a message to my family?" The assemblyman sighed. He looked me up and down, and I thought I saw pity in his eyes. "Sure, kid." I hated the pity I heard in his voice. It was as humiliating as the chains on my wrist and the black rags they clothed me with. "Tell them I didn't do it." "All right, I've had enough." He turned to the soldier who'd been standing silently next to him. Lenora, I guessed her name was. She looked like she was only a few years older than me, but she stood with the self-assuredness of someone much older. She was dressed in standard military combat garb, but from what I could tell, armed to the teeth. "Take him to the ship." Lenora approached me until we were face to face. She was only an inch shorter than me, which put her at 5'10". Up close, her expression didn't exactly make me think we'd be cracking jokes anytime soon. Her angular face was taut, her lips tight, her eyes fixated unsettlingly on mine. I'm Wyatt," I said, feigning confidence. "I'd shake your hand, but..." I wiggled my handcuffs so that they jiggled noisily. "You know." Lenora stared at me in thick silence for another few seconds. Then she broke eye contact, turned, and walked away from civilization and into the grassy wildlands. I gave the assemblyman one last dirty look, followed by a respectful head bow towards my home. I tore my eyes away from the great pillars and found Lenora a few paces ahead of me. I ran to catch up, awkward with my unfree hands. As we walked in silence, I looked around warily. The wildlands was home to nightmares that knew nothing of human law. I should know. As a soldier in the military, part of my job was to fend off its creatures when they tried to invade. Without the pillar's light, it was hard to see anything in detail. Fortunately, the grass was short beneath our feet, and I knew from experience that the land was flat for miles. If anything bigger than a rodent came for us, we'd see it. Not that I could do much at the moment. Damn it, I missed my hammer already. After several minutes, I started to make out the shape of something large in the distance. As we drew nearer, I recognized it. The ship had the same tubular shape, the same red-brown solid coloring, the same intimidating enormity as the one that Bog and his daughter Kara had arrived in. I shuddered at the memories that threatened to replay in the forefront of my mind. The envelope that Kara had given me. The vomit-inducing scene of her headless body outside of her hotel room. Bog's howls of loss, and his red-eyed, haunted expression that he beamed at me. The cell they threw me in. "We're ready," Lenora said. I turned to her, thinking she was talking to me, but I shouldn't have been so naive. In my hazy thoughts, I hadn't realized that we'd reached the ship. Up close, its beautiful details revealed themselves. The tube was coated in swirls of various shades of red. patterns whose underlying order I couldn't quite discern, but that my eyes found rather pleasing. From my angle, I could see a dozen or so windows on the right side of the tube, all sheathed from the outside. The wings that extended from the tube's side were made of the same seemingly clayish substance that the rest of the ship was made of, and 3 rotating guns sat upon them, slowly reorienting themselves, until they pointed at me. I tore my eyes from the ship towards the man standing before the ship's nose. He was around 6'2", and in the kind of shape I'd been hoping to be in after a couple years in the military. He wore armor from head to toe, the same exact, and I mean exact, color as the ship. It appeared to be a single continuous article, and yet as he walked towards us, the armor moved along with him as if it was another layer of skin. A utility belt hung around his waist, where a dagger and gun were both sheathed. Although his armor seemed to have no joints at which different components of armor connected, I did notice faint lines on his armor's arms and breast. They closed in on themselves, delineating regions that jutted very slightly above the rest of the armor, as if they were lids on containers. I noticed an emblem sketched over the part of his armor that covered his belly button, as if someone had pressed into the clay-like material before the design had permanently hardened. It looked to be a pictograph of an index finger and thumb pinching down on a droplet of water. The entire image was embedded in a perfect circle. Points of golden light shone from small bulbs on his shoulders and knees, providing enough light for me to see his face. The bridge of his nose was flatter than any human's, but his wide nostrils more than compensated. Even with his mouth closed, thin, fine fangs dangled from beneath his upper lip, falling nearly down past his chin. As with the only other 2 wolves I'd ever seen, most of his face was covered in thick hair. Although his helmet hid the top of his head, curly black thickets fell to cover his forehead, and beard covered everything below his cheekbones. I nearly took a step backwards when I looked below his wild eyebrows. His eyes were mostly dark brown, but silver freckles dotted his irises. I knew what those meant, even if he was a wolf. "Trip to the Builder's Mountain won't take long," the wolf said as he came within inches of us. "The pilot's ready to go." He extended an armored-coated hand. "Kane." Lenora took his hand. "I'm Lenora. Thanks for picking us up." Kane eyed me briefly before returning to Lenora. "The circumstances are most unfortunate, but the mind of the builder will rectify." "What does that mean?" I blurted. Lenora didn't turn to me, but Kane did. He looked at me, his expression stone, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned around and slapped a hand on the nose of the ship. One of the ship's windows seemed to grow wider, like an acid chewing up the clay around it. As it opened up, a ramp slid down from the floor from inside of the ship. Lenora walked towards it without so much as asking me to follow her. I could have tried to run away then and there. I'd fought creatures in the wildlands before. I could do it again. I looked down at my handcuffs and at my dirty hands. I hadn't showered since they'd arrested me. I looked back at the ship's wings, where its weapons were still pointed at me. Were they on? Would they shoot me on sight? I swallowed and ignored the fear that was gnawing its way through my insides. I took one last look at my empty, impotent, shaking hands. Then I followed Lenora into the ship, where I'd be taken to the world of the wolves, where an alien people would judge me for the murder of one of their own, where they might choose to end my life. To rectify, as Kane said. But I didn't join the military because I'd roll over so easily. Chapter 1. 6 days earlier. "You gonna eat that?" I looked up at Benjamin, who was staring eagerly at the untouched turkey leg on my plate. "Go for it, champ." He grabbed it with his bare hands and gnawed on the leg like a starved vulture. "God, that's disgusting," I muttered. "You really should slow down and learn some etiquette," Aiden said, who was sitting to Benjamin's right. "We're lucky to be at such a formal occasion." Benjamin tried to speak with his mouth full, but I interrupted. "Don't, dude. You start spitting across the table and they'll definitely kick us out." The brute rolled his eyes but obliged. I shared a look with Aiden, and we shook our heads in unison. The 3 of us sat at a round table by the hall's back wall, having chosen one of the dozen or so that had been assigned to soldiers. Some other rookies sat alongside us, but I think Benjamin's savagery kept them from chatting us up. I scanned the room and guessed that there were around 200 people enjoying the buffet. Military members were easy to pick out, since they wore star-shaped pins on their otherwise formal attire. We were told not to wear our combat gear for the banquet, but that we were encouraged to bring a weapon or two. My naked sledgehammer dangled from my belt. I recognize some of the philosophers here. She nodded towards a table several rows closer to the room's dais than we were. See them? They write about the nature of laws. I looked over at Aiden. She was pale, skinny, and her white blonde hair somehow reminded me of dying grass. Why would they be invited to this? Aiden smiled. Her green eyes darted excitedly. The wolves make things that humans could never dream to. I'm sure they're interested. I shrugged my shoulders so that my jacket fell back into place. It was a little big for me, but Mom tried her best. I hated dressing like this. If I wanted to dress up for work, I would have joined the ranks of commerce. Yeah, well, all that thinking won't help if the wolves decide the buffet isn't cutting it. Benjamin let loose a thunderous burp, which earned looks of horror by the other rookies at the table. I'm with Wyatt. You can't trust an animal. Didn't some horde of wolves try to raid Polygon just last week? I added. Yeah, Aiden said diffidently. But those were from the wildlands. This is different. Uh-huh, Benjamin muttered. Don't see any humans living in the wildlands. He tapped Aiden's nose. Don't be naive, sweetie. It'll get you killed. Aiden grabbed Benjamin's finger and tossed it away. Not all problems can be solved with a gun. Read a book, ogre. Books didn't help me last month against those rhinos, Benjamin retorted. Wyatt was there, he'll tell you. Wyatt? I'd only been half listening to my friend's banter. My eyes were locked with a man walking towards our table. What? Sure. Hey, I think Lieutenant Roderick is heading our way. Everyone at the table straightened up at that, including me. I had more reason than the others. Roderick was my lieutenant, my direct commander. Hey, he said when he reached me. I kept eye contact and prayed that I didn't have food on the sides of my mouth. Sir? Come find me after the ceremony. I have a job for you. I suppressed the excitement and curiosity that threatened to leak through my face. Yes, sir. With a nod, the strong-jawed lieutenant walked away. The rest of the rookies at the table looked at me, but I ignored them. Once Roderick was out of earshot, I whispered to Benjamin and Aiden, Guess I'm his favorite. Benjamin snorted. He probably wants you on cleaning duty. You don't think an event like this is already covered by the assembly? I retorted. No way. This'll be something interesting. The background chatter of the room suddenly died. I looked towards the dais to see a bald, round man dressed in an ocean blue suit and white shirt standing alone at its center. It was difficult to make out the pin on his jacket label, but I already knew what it was. A metallic square with 3 squiggly, horizontal lines etched on its surface. The symbol of humanity, of Polygon, of our leadership class. We'd had the honor of meeting this man on our last day of training, when we were officially inaugurated into the military. Clovis, the first assemblyman, second in political authority only to the ruler himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Clovis said cheerfully into a small microphone that ran from his ear down to his mouth. I thank you all for attending this most historic event. For thousands of years, we have lived our lives in Polygon as an isolated people, and we've been good at it. Our art flourishes. He gestured at the right-hand wall, on which hung a large painting of hooded philosophers buried in books. Our men and women of commerce ensure that our people's needs are satisfied. Our industry folk keep Polygon running without fail. And, of course, our military keeps the peace, both within our walls and without them. He's buttering up the crowd, I muttered to my friends. He knows working with wolves is a tough sell. Aiden put a finger to her lips. Benjamin was right. I didn't know how she made the cut. But there is more to the world than Polygon. Many of you may not know this, but the wolves have engineered some of the most astonishing creations I have ever seen. I've been there myself. Their world is one of gears and chemicals and things as magical as godlets themselves. And while I'm proud of what humankind has achieved, we can benefit from those on the other side of the continent. The last trade with wolves that the Assembly approved of was over 30 years ago. Many in this room will not have remembered it, and not only because there are so many young faces in attendance. It hardly lasted more than a week. Complications arose. The first assemblyman clasped his hands together and smiled devilishly, as if he were about to land a punchline. But failures of the past do not compel us to relinquish possibilities of the future. With the principles of earth and blood, we are boundless. He paused, and everyone clapped to fill the brief silence. Now, please welcome our guest of honor as he joins me. Bog is a renowned mogul at the Builder's Mountains. He has brought his daughter, Kara, along with him. A round of applause, please. While we obliged his request, two figures entered the dais from behind its back curtain and stood by Clovis. Both wore elegant white outfits that I nearly mistook for bathrobes, but the fabric was far finer than anything I'd wear on a lazy morning, and their clothes shone as brightly as snow under the sun. Odder than their stylistic choice was that the clothing was literally moving. Their tops gently rippled from left to right, as if dozens of tiny ocean waves were rolling underneath in rapid, successive, rhythmic fashion. Both of them wore jewelry from head to toe, each ornament cut from a different gem. Their dangling blood-red earrings and their sparkling gray bracelets rotated in perfect harmony with the mechanical dance of their robes. More than half of their fingers were decorated with gemstone rings. Those, at least, stood still. Their faces. My hand instinctively went to my hammer as I took them in, man and girl. Both were utterly covered in what looked like billions of thin whiskers. It was almost disgusting to look at. The larger man's hair was mostly dark gray, with a few dashes of white interspersed from his dome to his mane. The girl's hair was similar in character, but it was the yellow-green of spring leaves. She-wolves have beards. Noted. Their fangs extended down what I guessed was past their chins, but they were too hairy, or too whiskery, to tell. While the man-wolf was definitely lean for his size, the girl was definitely too skinny to be healthy. Even with all of that hair, I could see her sunken cheeks. As our applause died down, the taller of the pair offered a deep, long bow. "Hello to you all," he boomed in a deep, confident voice. "My daughter and I thank you for your hospitality. I've already met some of you when we landed earlier today. My name is Bog, and this is Kara." The girl waved to the crowd with both hands, as if trying to make a joke. She stumbled forward, and for a second, I thought she'd trip over her feet. Bog's gaze never left us, and he continued unabated. "My team and I have been in communication with Clovis and his cohorts for years, ironing out the details of this deal. The Great Builder has granted all of us most fortuitous circumstances. You see, I have learned that underneath Polygon may rest undiscovered veins of metals and other valuable materials. If I understand correctly, you all use much of this metal for what you call money. But we don't have this money in the Builder's Mountains. We employ the Great Builder's seeds towards far more creative ends. With his gifts, we fertilize the world." I frowned. Was that a dig at us? I noticed other faces turn sour too. But Bog either didn't notice, or he didn't care. "We have had toys that sniff out those Earth's riches long before I came into contact with your people. We call them metal detectors. With knowledge of how Polygon runs, my team created a specialized device just for you, your own artificial bug. But I digress. I won't bore you with details here, nor with a demonstration. Clovis and the rest of your assembly have already seen its efficacy. Your men of industry will receive shipments of my toys. It has been agreed upon that I will receive some modest fraction of any metals that my bugs discover for you." Bog paused. This is... Kara took a wobbly step forward, and an explosion of bile and chunks of who knows what rocketed from her mouth. Benjamin yelled profanity, but it was drowned out by the hundreds of other yells of shock. I looked wide-eyed towards my friends. "She's drunk," I muttered. "Guess booze hits wolves the same way it hits us." Okay, Clovis shouted, as Bog grabbed his daughter by the arm and quickly fell back behind the curtain from which they came. "I'm terribly sorry, friends. Kara must be unwell. In any case, I thank you all for attending once again. Have a good night, everyone." People immediately began shuffling out of the hall. I saw staff who had been silently standing against the walls begin to clean up the place, including the vomit on the dais. "That was weird," Aiden said as the three of us rose to our feet. "Yep," Benjamin muttered. "This guy's supposed to be our friend or something? He brought his drunk daughter to his welcome ceremony. He's spitting in our faces." "No," Aiden responded. "I mean, I've read about the wolves. They normally raise their children communally. It's odd that Bog has a daughter of his own at all." "Guess your books don't have all the answers after all," Benjamin teased. "I did know that wolves don't have a currency," Aiden protested. I put my fist out. "As much as I'd love to stick around, I'm going to find Lieutenant Roderick. I'll see you back at the hotel." My friends took turns bumping my fist, and I headed towards the table I had seen Roderick sitting at. When I turned his way, I saw that everyone at his table had already left, except him. He was waiting for me. Sir," I said as I approached his backside. "You wanted to see me?" Roderick turned his head but remained seated and utterly still. "Sit for a second, Wyatt." I did, and I turned my chair so that we were face to face. "What can I do for you?" The lieutenant's dimples showed as he held back a grin. "Some ceremony, huh? Seems like the assembly will approve the deal." Roderick laughed. "Relax, Wyatt. It's just you and me here." Now his face did break out in a flashy smile. "What do you really think?" I broke eye contact with my commander. "Sorry, I don't know what to say, sir." "Hey, kid, listen to me. Look at me. You're what, 19 years old? You've been in the military for less than a year. I've seen you in training, in action. You've got more drive than most rookies I've come across." I looked back at Roderick and did my best to suppress the elation that wanted to leap out of my throat. "Really?" Roderick winked at me and nodded. "Between you and me, you're passionate about your job. How long have you wanted to join the military?" "I never considered another profession, sir." "Figured as much. You could go a long way, kid. I see it. And I'm in your camp. Know that." "I appreciate that. I don't know what to say." His playful expression again broke out in a chuckle. "You said that already. Now I ask again, what did you think of that ceremony?" "Well, I don't understand why Bog would bring his daughter out if she's such a liability." Roderick nodded. "Go on." "I don't know what's going on with, what was her name, Kara? If Bog wanted to earn our trust or respect, why would he have brought his drunk daughter onto the dais? Unless his judgment is that poor, in which case we shouldn't be trading with him in the first place. Or maybe he did it on purpose, to spit in our face. It's dicey enough working with any wolf, let alone a stupid or malevolent one." "Why is that?" My nerves had faded away, and I leaned closer to my lieutenant. "Humans should stick to our own. Things are good enough at Polygon. Clovis said it himself. Why entangle ourselves with another race?" I shook my head. "They're not worth it." "There it is," Roderick said approvingly. "I might agree with you, kid. But maybe Bog's technology will land us gold. More money is never a bad thing. I don't know, honestly. I hadn't heard about the details until his speech." "He was mocking us," I snapped. "He called his own technology toys several times. Like we're just receiving the bottom of the barrel. Screw him and his drunk daughter." Okay. Roderick held his hands up teasingly. "I hear you. I don't like working with them either." He shrugged his shoulders. But you're wrong about one thing, Wyatt. Things can always get better. Yeah, well, I muttered. I guess we'll see. And speaking of his drunk daughter, as you called her, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I sat back in my chair. Oh? Roderick cocked his head and looked vaguely puzzled. You were in attendance when their ship landed earlier today. I know the two of them exited very quickly and were escorted away, but did you by any chance make eye contact with Kara? I pursed my lips. Not at all. To be totally honest, I barely looked at them. Not curious to see what a wolf looked like? I know you hadn't seen one yet, out in the wildlands. Nope, not at all. They're not us. Roderick snorted. Fair enough. And you've been in my sights for the last few hours, and you couldn't have interacted with her since then. Sir, what's this about? She wants a night out on the town. Apparently, she wants to check out the capital's bar scene. From what I'm told, she requested you as her tour guide. I frowned. What? That's my task? Roderick nodded. Yeah, not the sexiest order I'll give you, but there it is. There are guests, so it's not really our call. No, I get that. Bog's going to let her out after that debacle? How old is she anyway? I don't know. A couple years younger than you, I guess, though the beard makes it hard to tell. I ran a hand through my hair, unsure how to react. I don't like this. I don't want to talk to these wolves. I definitely don't want to babysit some drunk. I get it. Think of it as a security service. I don't know how these wolves choose to live, and I certainly wouldn't let my kid out after humiliating me. Who knows, maybe that's going to be the case. Before the ceremony, my superior had told Bog that you'd meet her outside her hotel at 9 p.m. Maybe she won't show, but if she does, you're there to protect her. I grinned at my lieutenant. I do like that better than babysitting. He lightly punched me on the arm. There you go. Oh, and don't change your clothes. Let's keep a professional face. Definitely. Do you know where No Rules is? It's a high-end bar just a few blocks from where Kara and Bog are staying. I nodded. Yeah, I've never gone in, though. Last time I was in the capital was when we passed our training. My friends and I celebrated in the area. I'm sure you did. Here. Roderick pulled out something from his jacket pocket and handed me half a dozen heavy golden coins. I looked at them and saw the same insignia inscribed on them that was on Clovis's pin. I whistled. This isn't your money, is it? Of course not. I like you, but not that much. The assembly's covering whatever Kara wants tonight. I won't drink, I assured him. He smiled proudly at me. I know you won't. Look, I know it won't be the most fun job, but I'll make sure people know you did it well. Thank you, sir. Do you know why she chose me? Roderick rose to his feet, and I followed suit. He extended a rough, calloused hand to me. I met his grip. You have an hour to yourself before you're on duty. I have no idea why she insisted on you, but you can ask her. Might be a good way to bypass small talk, anyway. Good luck, Wyatt. I'll see you in the morning. Thank you, sir. For everything. I won't let you down. With one last charming grin, my commander walked away and left the banquet hall. I looked around and realized that no one was left but the cleaning crew and me. I closed my eyes and took a breath. One night. One wolf. One job. I got this.